Oh, just a limited strike. Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Okay, so Bernie Sanders was given an interview to Face the Nation, and I'm not 100% sure what the reporter's name is that's asking him this question, but she basically asked him about a limited strike in Iran, and Bernie Sanders gave this response.
I want to ask you about Iran.
Good.
Was President Trump's decision this week to call off that strike the right one?
See, it's like somebody setting a fire to a basket full of paper and then putting it out. He helped create the crisis, and then he stopped the attacks. The idea that we're looking at a president of the United States who, number one, thinks that a war with Iran is something that might be good for this country.
He was just doing a limited strike.
Oh, just a limited strike. Oh, well, I'm sorry. I just didn't know that it's okay to simply attack another country with bombs, just a limited strike. That's an act of warfare. So 2 points. That will set off a conflagration all over the Middle East. If you think the war, as I do, the war in Iraq, Margaret, was a disaster, I believe from the bottom of my heart that a war with Iran would be even worse, more loss of life, never-ending war in that region, massive instability. We're talking about, we have been in Afghanistan now for 18 years. This thing will never end. So I will do everything I can, number one, to stop a war with Iran.
Well, damn. Get him, Bernie. So that had to have been said, and Bernie Sanders deserves a round of applause for saying that on Face the Nation and doing so in such a direct and clear way, because it needs to be said that way, because we have to get the message through to as many people as we can that this is not something that's acceptable, it's not something that should be allowed, and it's not something where it's just a quote-unquote limited strike if we go and attack another country. So you can't just go and do an offensive strike on another country. It's not a thing that the United States should be doing, but it's something that the United States and a lot of the citizens of the United States have gotten far too accustomed to think of it as somewhat normal, or as just a limited strike, as she said, rather than an act of warfare. And Bernie Sanders did a very good job dissecting what the difference is between how you even say it in dialogue, just saying, oh, it's a limited strike. Then people think, okay, just a limited strike, kind of just like a warning, whatever. But then you think, if that happened to the United States, is that a limited strike? If Iran did that to us, is that something that's a limited strike, or is that an act of warfare? They shot down our drone, and basically everybody on Fox News, bar like Tucker Carlson, maybe one or two other people, are saying, go to war. Go to war. You gotta punish them. You gotta give them the full heat after they shot down that drone. Even though we're most likely in the wrong for that drone being in our airspace. So that's what it is. And I mean, it points out the hypocritical nature of when people look at this and say, oh, it's just a limited strike, and think that it's not an escalation leading to warfare with Iran. Because if you think Iran's just going to sit there and take quote-unquote limited strikes, it's not going to be a thing that's going to simmer down. It's not going to simmer down tensions. It's not going to be something where Iran gets that warning strike, how they want to represent it, and then says, oh, you know what? Well, yeah, maybe we should just back off and we're cool. Like that, it's not realistic to even remotely think that, because tensions would be higher than ever at that point. And even some people, when Donald Trump was considering doing the strike in the Pentagon, were reported as to being worried about the escalation of some kind of strike in that manner, and the fact that they could have people at risk in Syria and Iraq as well if Iran decided to retaliate. So if you think about it, even in that regard, let's say that's true, that the Pentagon is concerned about that, and that they're worried about retaliation against troops that are stationed in Iraq and Syria at the moment that could be vulnerable. Then if that's the case, then Donald Trump, by doing a limited strike, is costing us American lives when no American lives were at stake or lost in that initial drone attack. So and then the fact on top of that is that the reported death toll that Donald Trump was told would have happened would have been 150 people if we did that limited strike. So you could cost Americans their lives. You're costing Iranians their lives. This is not a game. And the United States government treats it far too often like a video game. And that's a quote from Greg Gutfeld, who he's not saying that it's a problem that the United States treats it that way. He's saying, hey, it's just like a video game. You go in there, it's machines against machines. Nobody really dies. You just dominate the air, take Iran down. It's done. Done. Just like a video game. And that's how a lot of these Fox News people think about it. And that's how a lot of people who are neocons, whether they're in the government or otherwise, think about it as well. And we need to stop being so used to this American imperialism and just limited strikes, and that's not really an escalation or an act of warfare. And Bernie Sanders did a fantastic job of standing strong, shutting down that limited strike nonsense that the reporter was saying, and saying, listen, that is an act of warfare. That area in general in the Middle East is completely unstable. We've destabilized a lot of it, like Iraq and Afghanistan. And if you think we're going to get out of there quickly afterwards, once this war starts to really flame up, it's not going to happen. We're still in Afghanistan 19 years later, or 18 years later. So these things don't end because let's say we even go in there, we topple Iran's government like we did with Iraq. That still turned into a thing that lasted for decades, or for over a decade, I should say, after that. So you're looking at something that even if you just go in there and let's say you topple the leader, which there would be tremendous bloodshed just doing that alone and tremendous amounts of money spent. Now you're looking at an unstable country. And now you're having other factions rise up that want power or that are insurgent groups or insurgent groups from the remaining power structure that are there. And now you say, and then the United States turns around and says, well, we have all these insurgent groups and terrorist groups that are vying for power here. It wouldn't be responsible for us to just leave this in this kind of power vacuum of a state, so now we have to stay and make sure that transitions over to a nice US-like democracy, and we just got to stay as long as it takes to make sure that everything is in order here. But the problem is nothing is ever going to be in order there because we just destabilized the entire country and pounded it into the ground with missiles and bombs and gunfire. So Bernie Sanders, like I said, great for him to stand up on that on a big platform and say something like that, and hopefully he changed a couple people's minds about the limited strike. Because too often that lingo is used to make it seem not that big of a deal when it's a huge deal, and it could end up being the escalation that leads to hundreds of thousands of people losing their lives, if not millions. And a war that goes on for over a decade that costs trillions and trillions of dollars and destabilizes a region that is already extremely unstable. So, congrats to Bernie Sanders for doing that, and hopefully he continues to go out there and use the big microphone that he has and the amount of clout that he has to ring the alarm about what is going on between the United States and Iran. And one last thing I just wanted to add to the matter as well, that comment that Bernie Sanders had said in the beginning about setting fire to a wastebasket full of paper and then putting it out is the amount of credit that Donald Trump gets for that. And that is true, 100%, because the Iran deal would still be in place if not for Donald Trump. So this whole wastebasket on fire that is Iran is started because of Donald Trump. He started that fire by backing out of the Iran deal. Now, was he partially possibly just an idiot where he hated it because Obama did it and he felt like that was a big accomplishment for Obama, and he wanted to be able to do something involving Iran that overshadowed what Obama did and made Obama look bad? Completely think that's 100% part of it. Then he adds a lot of neocons into his administration, and they're pushing for it, and he's very influenceable from other people's opinions. So he'll listen to them, and if you're the last one in the room with him, you can sway him on a certain frame of mind to have regarding an issue. So that was another mistake. And then on top of that, you also have the case that we're also implementing harsh sanctions on them because we got rid of the Iran deal. So that's hurting them a lot as well. And that's causing suffering for the people of Iran. And there was also another thing that I also wanted to say involving Donald Trump with the Iran deal. Oh, in terms of why he did it. So I had said because having the neocons in his administration are pushing towards heightening tensions with Iran and eventually invading Iran. Then you also have the fact that he campaigned against the Iran deal and said it was a terrible deal. So maybe Donald Trump came in thinking that because he's a complete and utter moron and doesn't know anything about what's going on, that he thought, somehow he could like bully Iran into a better deal than what Obama had without starting a war, since he was also simultaneously campaigning against doing these big, expensive regime change wars. So that's possible. And then on top of that, you also have the fact that Donald Trump now, he's just kind of, he has bullish and he has like bully-like and tough man tendencies where he automatically wants to react in a tough guy way. So he probably thought, you know what, I'll bully Iran into some new deal and I'll be tough on them with the sanctions and threaten them and do all these mean tweets about them, and I'll eventually get them to fold to somehow whatever deal he thinks would be better than the Obama deal, which God knows what that would necessarily entail. But that's, I think, basically what in his idiotic frame of mind he was thinking when he was doing all this. And that's why I think he also kind of waffled on doing the actual strike and going to war with Iran, is because he's not 100% in favor of that, but you have a lot of neocons that he's put in his administration, like John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, that are pushing for this war with Iran and are pushing for escalating tensions every day. And I don't think Donald Trump realizes that every time that he's doing these tension heightening acts, that he's leading us one step closer to war, which is what these neocons want. But I think he's such a buffoon, and he's just kind of tunnel visioning through it, where he's not seeing all of the ramifications of what he's actually doing. He's just in his own world thinking he's just some big idiot tough guy and he's going to bully Iran into something and it's going to make him look great. But behind the scenes, I think neocons like John Bolton see that and say, we could use that to our advantage. We can heighten tensions to the max because Donald Trump won't back down, and then there's no real opportunity for a deal when tensions get this inflamed. So I think they're seeing that as a way to get right into a war, and they're using Donald Trump to do so. But it was good. You have to give Donald Trump credit, despite the fact that he's the cause for all of this, of at least not doing the strike in this one particular incident, I'll say. So you give him credit for this one particular incident, even though he's the one that's causing all of this trouble to be happening, and he started the fire. At least he didn't make the fire a wildfire by doing those strikes. So it's the smallest positive in the world. He really doesn't deserve credit overall for it, but in the moment, let's just give him credit for it, so that way he thinks he's doing the right thing. You know what I mean? So anything that he does that's correct, just say, all right, that's correct. And you can also obviously give context to the fact that he started this whole mess in the first place, like I did. But he is correct in at least waffling on that strike, because that could have been an unmitigated disaster, and it could have been the beginning of the war with Iran. So that's the situation we're looking at right now, and I just wanted to detail those comments about starting the fire in a wastebasket that Bernie Sanders had made at the beginning of that clip. So I will be talking to all of you soon. Subscribe, like the video, share it as well among the progressive or political community as a whole. I genuinely appreciate it. If you want to contribute, you can contribute to me on Venmo at Sean Casella, SeanCassella. And I always want to hear your opinion, so follow me on Twitter at Plutocracy Today. Talk to me about anything you'd want on there, or ask me to cover any topic that you would like me to cover, and I'll always take that under consideration. And you can also email me at seancasella@gmail.com. That is SeanCassella@gmail.com. I genuinely appreciate it, guys, and I will be talking to all of you soon.